And then you mentioned, some of your day to day, and every day is probably very different, like you said. Um, just thinking in the last few weeks, like what is an example of a story that you're comfortable telling? Hopefully it's not too personal, or the person would be okay with you telling it. Like, what would be an example of, like, in the last few weeks, something that stood out as like a story where you were called upon and feel like you may have made a big impact in somebody in a spiritual way?
Oh, well, just last week, um, I got a text early Monday morning that somebody, a member of the synagogue, I got it from his wife, that he was in hospice at home. And, no rush, but could I come and visit in a little bit? Because, he's been sick. He's got terminal cancer, and, he's going to die soon. And so he's at hospice at home. And I rushed over. I went over later in the morning, and we sat, and he really wasn't coherent, but, I talked. His kids were there. We said a prayer. I spoke to him, even though he really couldn't respond. And then I talked with the wife a little bit, and then I left, and that night he passed away. So that I was happy. And then a few days later, we did the funeral service. I was with members of the family. And then in between his death and the funeral service, I sat with members of the family to learn more about his life so I could craft a eulogy. So that's kind of now I could not have a funeral for another 2 or 3 weeks. It kind of, it's sometimes things just, and then sometimes it all happens at once. So that's really sort of my bread and butter, those kind of things.
I,
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing that story. My mom passed away about 20 years ago, and it's such a blur, like when it's happening, before it's happening, after it's happening. And like you don't hardly know what's going on. You don't know what to feel. But the thing that shines through is like that human connection, like a hug or a touch or somebody maybe unexpected that said something. And you might not even register what they're saying, but that human connection is kind of what stands out after those things. So I'm sure that made a huge impact on their lives, that they'll remember for a long time. So yeah, that's a very cool story.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, the way I think of it, I could be wrong, and I'm sure other people think differently, but to me, the most important part of what I do are actually funerals. I figure at a wedding, you know, unless I mess up, like say the wrong name or something, everyone's going to be happy. Like it's hard to mess up at a wedding. You do. Whereas at a funeral, what I say, people are actually really listening. Like it can make a big difference, as you just said. So in some ways, it matters to me, matters more at those moments, and where I'm making the biggest impact.
Yeah, gotcha. I would have to agree. Just seeing, I mean, maybe it's just again cinema, movies, whatever, but seeing a Jewish wedding looks like it is an absolute riot. So
Yeah,
I
it's
don't think
fun.
you can mess up too bad.
No.
That's amazing. Yeah, much more fun than a Mormon wedding, let me tell you. Well, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I've got a million other questions I want to ask you, but I do want to dig into your health story as well. So, as you're getting your training and you're settling into the career and your day to day, what was going on with your health? I didn't really hear you get into this too much in the podcast episode you did with them, and I would love to know, like, what was going on in your own personal health? Were you, it sounded like you were running quite a bit, but maybe still having issues with weight. Like, tell us about your own health in your own life.
Yeah, it's such an interesting. I've never been extremely unhealthy. I've been a little bit overweight. 15, 20 pounds maybe. Um, but I've always been relatively healthy, mainly because I've always worked out. Um, uh, Sometimes more, sometimes less, but always either lifting weights or running. Um, but my diet was always horrible, and I just didn't have great metabolism. For what I was doing for my working out, I should have been in better shape, but that's just how it was. And I also always had a certain low grade pain in my stomach. I mean, I think potentially I have something like, IBS. I could have it. The doctors have always speculated, but it's hard to diagnose all the time. Some doctors have suspected I've had Crohn's, which my sister does. So, but anyways, I always had some low grade stomach pain, and I was always a little bit heavier than I'd like to be. I discovered keto, let's see, now it would be 7 years ago, and it was phenomenal. It was just, I literally, after like a month, I lost 20, 25 pounds. So it just came off very quickly. and I was in the best shape that I've ever been in. It was great. And my stomach pain went down a little bit, but I still had this low grade. Now I think it was inflammation, just constant inflammation. And um, then discovered carnivore through some different podcasts and YouTubes, and I tried it and just it clicked perfectly. And that stomach pain that had always been there really went away. And I had a lot of greater mental clarity. And it just kind of brought back a lot of energy that I've always been a high energy guy, but the carnivore kind of unleashed another level of it. Um, and just, help me write more, lift weights more, get in the best shape I've ever been in, and just be a better dad, I think. I've got two kids, two teenage girls. Now they're getting towards the end of teenage years. So um that's been my journey. And really, so from discovering keto 7 years ago to really starting carnivore 3.5 years ago, it's just gotten better.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you recall how you heard about keto? And also, had you done very many diets before you had found that? Like, were you like a chronic dieter or just eat whatever?
No, I was a totally eat whatever. Yeah, I had never dieted before. And some of it might have been my age. I turned 40 in 2018. So, while I kind of got by doing everything, it could have been a function of age. Like suddenly, oh, I got to better watch what I eat a little more. But I'd always eaten anything. I loved peanut butter. I tried to be somewhat healthy, but generally, I figured since I ran, I could eat whatever I want. Um, and I discovered it. It's a funny. I'm a big fan of an influencer. He's an author named Michael Hyatt. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's great, but I follow him, and he talked about how he was doing keto, and I was like, oh, keto, what is this? And I looked it up, and I started reading about it. I said, this could work for me. Because certain things were, almond butter was fine, certain things, and I was like, I really don't, I don't love soda. I don't love, there's certain things that get in the way of keto, um, that I didn't really like. So I tried it, and it was really his influence.
Wow, interesting. No, I've never heard of him. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Our timings are very similar. I heard about the ketogenic diet really in force for the first time about 7 years ago.
Yeah.
I tried carnivore for the first time 6 years ago, so a little bit more time there. But it is quite remarkable how most people's stories kind of jive and were really similar to yours, where it's like I found keto for however long it takes to convince somebody that it's either something they want to do or is going to be beneficial, or they're not freaked out about cholesterol, or we hear the thing all the time that people are drinking melted butter and eating only bacon, which nobody does literally. And so it's just once you get past that initial weirdness, most people say the same thing. Like, I dropped weight for like the first time in my life. I just wasn't that hungry and the weight came off. I normally don't hear many more benefits than that. But that is one thing we can say about switching over from a ketogenic diet, basically from anywhere you are, is you can lose weight pretty easily and quickly without too much hunger on a ketogenic diet. And it sounds like that was your experience as well.
No question. No question. Yeah. I mean, in some ways, because there's been a few times, I mean, I've been pretty consistent as a carnivore. There was a few times I had my appendix removed. So for a little while, I was kind of not being as strict and I sometimes actually lose weight when I've gone off of carnivore, because I never go out of, ketosis, or I mean, I'm sure I'm not in ketosis all the time, but the times that I've lapsed from carnivore, I've just basically been keto. And there have been times I've actually lost weight. I think maybe I'm eating more fat. Like I'll eat like certain things that I generally wouldn't eat as a carnivore. So yeah, keto is great for weight loss. What I found the best about carnivore was not as much about the physical health, was the mental part of it. That's what made the difference between keto and carnivore for me, was just first of all, the simplicity itself is just wonderful and comforting. Like, I know exactly what I'm going to eat. And then really the mental clarity. I think some of that too comes to certain, I have really come to see that carnivore and keto works for more people, but carnivore is life changing for certain types of people, not everybody. some, not everybody, some carnivores are so they think everybody should be carnivore. I don't think that. I think certain people benefit from it so much. And one of the common things, at least that I felt, is people who have addiction issues, I'm talking, I mean, it can manifest as drug addiction and things like that, but it's just addiction to anything. Could be addiction to exercise, addiction to certain tastes in your mouth. Carnivore helps enormously. It creates a certain kind of sobriety and simplicity and nourishment. It gives you that nourishment that people look for in other things. It could be someone who's addicted to diet soda. It could be someone who's addicted to chewing gum or something. A strict carnivore diet is one of the best tools you can have for people who experience those issues.
Would you say, like, in hindsight in particular, like, would that describe you and your own personality as like on the addictive side?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And for me, it was actually in many ways a positive addiction. I think I was addicted in some ways to running. I did it. I had a running injury, and I think I had overdone myself, which I think a lot of runners kind of get that way. But you get the runner's high, and um, so that was part of it. Also, I've written several books, and I kind of almost think I was addicted to writing. Almost in some ways, you just get addicted to certain things, and um, and a lot of them were positive. I've never had any, drug or addiction issues in that regard, but more in just kind of my psychology. And I think carnivore kind of, let me relax around those in a positive way.
Yeah, it's hard to identify in yourself, and there's different assessments you can do and that kind of thing. But if we think about an addict, like if I'm telling somebody what I've told somebody my entire career is like moderation, 80/20 or 90/10 or whatever that line is for you, I can just speak for myself that the longer I go, if I dabble a little bit, I can't turn it off very easily to my own detriment. Like I've mentioned this before. Like I cheated on my diet a few weeks ago. I don't like to use the word cheat, but I went off of carnivore. I ordered a pizza and I ate way more pizza than I wanted to. Like three-quarters of this pizza was gone. And I'm just not the person that is going to put dish soap on the last piece or throw it out like a sane, logical person. I'm going to be sick to my stomach, know that my sleep is going to suck, my anxiety is going to be back, and I'm going to eat that last piece of pizza.
Yeah. It addiction is very, and that in some ways, every human being has certain addictions. I mean, we all do. And some of them are harmless and some of them are very harmful. But th- part of it is just the human condition. I'd say everybody is addicted to carbs because we needed carbs to survive. So, in fact, we selected over time. There were times when people didn't have any animals, so there was no hunt, and so people who could digest carbs and get energy from things you could grab from a tree or from a plant could survive more. And so we grew. It didn't change our. We still thrive on carnivore, but we have a desire for carbs because they kept us alive. And so, in some sense, we're all addicted to carbs. Some people say, one of there's a great book on this. Lierre Keith is the author. It's called the
So
Vegetarian Myth.
so good.
Where she said, "Oh, it's such a great that it's essentially addiction to carbs is what led to the agricultural revolution." I mean, it's fascinating stuff. So addiction is a huge thing, and so we do things that we generally know are bad for us. We all do. Again, some are more harmful than others. Like that was harmful for a period of time. It sucked, and you knew it would suck, but you get over it. Now,
Yeah.
other addictions are much harder.